show. You're one-on-one with Wes the Sports Guy here on YouTube, BitChute, and Rumble, and online all the time at westhesportsguy.com. Make sure you bookmark that site if you want to get the MLB preview, recaps, some updates on what's going on in the NFL offseason. The quarterback carousel is just about underway. The madness of March, we're going to have the NCAA tournament in college basketball starting this year after it not happening last year due to lockdown madness. But we're back to March Madness going into 2021. Make sure you bookmark westhesportsguy.com if you want to get all the social media links as well for your favorite sports guy. It is all conveniently located for you there at the top of the page at westhesportsguy.com. Getting into it, it is time to introduce a new segment called Sports Media is a Flat-Out Joke.
Stop making fun of me, idiot.
Now, the first example that I give to you is that the Atlanta Hawks in the NBA, they recently fired their head coach Lloyd Pierce after a very, let's just say, abysmal season so far to the 2020-2021 season for the Atlanta Hawks franchise. And Rick Carlisle, the head coach of the Dallas Mavericks, decided to say something publicly that I could not believe. I could not believe it. So to give you the context of this quote that I will share for you, basically Rick Carlisle, who is the head coach of the Dallas Mavericks, is also part of there is apparently a union for head coaches in the NBA, maybe not just for head coaches, but coaches in general. There is a union for them. And Rick Carlisle, I believe, is the head honcho, president, whatever you want to call him, CEO, I don't care. But he is at the top of that union. So what he said here publicly about the firing of Lloyd Pierce, in context, has to do with politics more than the actual job performance of Lloyd Pierce as head coach of the Atlanta Hawks. Lloyd Pierce has had 2 full seasons as the head coach of the Atlanta Hawks. Going into almost halfway of this season, he has had no playoff appearances. Lloyd Pierce, win-loss total for the Atlanta Hawks, as you can see on your screen, has 65 wins and 120 losses, with a winning percentage of just a hair over 35% in 2.5 seasons worth of as a head coach for the Atlanta Hawks. The Atlanta Hawks had a lot of high expectations going into the season. That doesn't mean they're not going to live up to those expectations. Nate McMillan is now the interim head coach for the Atlanta Hawks. Nate McMillan's had a very good track record as a head coach in this league. He's had a lot of success with the Portland Trail Blazers. He was a head coach of the then Seattle Supersonics, I believe, as his first head coaching gig. But like I said, Portland Trail Blazers, he was a head coach there for a long time, also a head coach in the Indiana Pacers before this. So not a bad replacement for Lloyd Pierce, considering Lloyd just wasn't up to the job, and plus there were high expectations going into the season. That's pretty much the reason why you fire a head coach. In fact, the only reason, it's job performance. Was he getting the job done? Apparently he was not, as the record shows. But Rick Carlisle, going back to him, he decided to make the quote of all quotes that I've seen in sports in quite some time. And this just proves that politics has infected every freaking thing with this quote from Rick Carlisle about Lloyd Pierce being fired by the Atlanta Hawks. Quote, Georgia, in very large part because of Lloyd's work and commitment, went from being a traditional Republican state to a Democratic state, which has massively changed the landscape of our country. What? So, because Lloyd Pierce evidently helped and thinks politically like you and most of the coaches in the NBA, apparently, because Lloyd was, in your words, instrumental in helping the state of Georgia in a very hotly contested political climate switch the state from a R to a D, you're trying to say that's why he should stay as the head coach of the Atlanta Hawks? I'm sure Rick Carlisle talked about the job performance in this context of the conversation with reporters, but to put out a quote like that says all you need to know about Rick Carlisle and his priorities, you could say, when it comes to As I said in the beginning, he is the head honcho for the coaches union in the NBA. Didn't know they had a thing. I found this out a few years back, but I know that's part of Rick Carlisle's gig right now. Not just as the head coach of the Dallas Mavericks, but he's part of this too. So, going forward, is that going to be the litmus test for NBA head coaches? Do you have these types of political leanings, and thus you'll be defended in case you ever, have scrutiny, criticism, or the potential of being fired? Will the pressure come down to say, whoa, 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 he agrees with us politically. You can't fire him. This is the litmus test now? Whether or not if it's an R or a D next to somebody's name, that you help turn the tide in a very volatile political climate, that's the litmus test for employment in the NBA for head coaches? Now, the roles can be reversed. I don't care if it's the R's instead of the D's. It's wrong regardless. If I decided not to show up to work for an entire week and not say anything about me not showing up to work, I rightfully would get fired. But in this kind of a context, if I did that, but I said, whoa, 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 I voted all this way this past election season via, I don't care if it's an R or a D, whichever one, but if my job agrees with me politically, I shouldn't be fired. This is an insane standard, and it should be mocked and scorned to the umpteenth degree, as I'm doing right now in this segment that sports media is a joke. Because was there any report or any follow-up to this with Rick Carlisle other than this quote here? Not that I saw. When ESPN reported the story of Lloyd Pierce being fired by the Atlanta Hawks, rightfully so, it's a story about the guy not living up to the job standard, the performance, the expectations of the job for the Atlanta Hawks. He didn't live up to it. That was the story. Did they include this in that story? No, they did not. I wonder why. And just a little bit more hypocrisy for you here. Greg Popovich, who, again, if you're all buddies with a guy, I get it. Greg Popovich, I'm not going to give you the full quote, but Greg Popovich basically defended Lloyd Pierce, saying he's a good coach, he's good tacticianer, all that kind of stuff. The usual cliches that you would hear from a head coach. Greg Popovich has Lloyd Pierce with him to help with the USA basketball team in recent years, and I think going forward, if not, oh well. But that's why he's defending Lloyd Pierce, because they have a working relationship with USA basketball. Although, Greg Popovich, to say Lloyd Pierce deserves, more wiggle room, to say the least, with that kind of a record, barely over 35% winning percentage in 2.5 seasons as the head coach of the Atlanta Hawks, he didn't give a guy by the name of Bob Hill much of a chance after Bob Hill, in 2 full seasons as head coach of the San Antonio Spurs back in the late 90s, more specifically 96 and 97, had 62 and 59 win seasons, and in one of those years got the Spurs to the conference finals in the Western Conference. But then in the 3rd season, Bob Hill, the team started out 3 and 15. And then he got the axe. Greg Popovich took over, and the rest is history. As you know, Greg Popovich has been the head coach all that time. But Greg Popovich was the GM at the time when he fired Bob Hill. Did you give Bob much of a chance? After a 62 and a 59 win season, but then you start the 3rd season 3-15? I get it. I understand why you fire the guy after a 3 and 15 season after the success you had the previous 2. But in this context, defending Lloyd Pierce, it's job performance. That's a different franchise. They have different standards, apparently, than what you would have. To each its own. But Greg, realize you've got a little bit of history of not giving people much of a chance after much better success. But again, if this is the litmus test going forward, this is a freaking joke. Because if the media is not going to call that out for what it is, which is idiocy, the standards are going to be well above any kind of comprehension of logic going forward. If we're going to go off of political leanings, whether or not somebody should keep their job or not. And the second story I have highlighted for you of why sports media in general is a joke. J.J. Watt, he has signed with the Arizona Cardinals. Now going into this free agent frenzy, you could call it, for the NFL, a lot of talk about J.J. Watt, whether he was going to end up with a contender, whether he's going to be reunited with his brothers in Pittsburgh. All that speculation was about, and rightfully so. I totally get it. It made sense to me logically speaking, that J.J. Watt would want to win before the end of his career. I mean, he's had some very successful seasons. He's a 3-time Defensive Player of the Year. He's most likely going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer when his career is all said and done. Is he going to go for that Super Bowl title regardless of what the stats say, regardless of even what his contract says? That was also another question. It wasn't talked about a whole lot, but it's part of the equation here because he was getting paid pretty handsomely with the Houston Texans. So, all the talk about J.J. Watt, where was he going to go? Was he going to go to the Cleveland Browns? Was he going to go to Tennessee? Was he going to go to Pittsburgh, like I said, with his brothers, his fullback brother, Derek Watt, and a linebacker who was a Defensive Player of the Year candidate this last season, T.J. Watt? Was he going to be reunited with them in Pittsburgh? It made sense. It made absolutely sense. Perfect sense. Buffalo was another contender. The possibilities were just about endless, for the most part, at least who was going to be contending to get J.J. Watt services. But what ended up happening? J.J. Watt signed with the Arizona Cardinals. He signed with them for a 2-year deal, and he got paid almost $25 million in guarantees for the 2 years in Arizona. Now, I do not hold anything against J.J. Watt. That is perfectly fine for him to play wherever he wants. Although he's playing in a division against my favorite team, the 49ers, that's beside the point. Arizona needed help in the pass rush. They got the guy that would definitely help, and plus also a healthy Chandler Jones in J.J. Watt. And they're paying him pretty handsomely to do that for about 2 seasons. But it's just funny to me that the sports media got this dead wrong. They thought he was going to go somewhere else to be instant contenders, and you don't really see the Cardinals as instant contenders right now. Even signing J.J. Watt doesn't make them instant contenders, but picking where he wants to go, it's free agency, mind you, he went somewhere strictly because the money was too hard to pass. And I, again, do not hold anything against J.J. Watt for doing that. I'm sure there were teams that were offering a pretty good chunk of change as well, but when you're getting that much guaranteed for 2 full seasons, it's hard to pass up. I don't blame him for that. But in all, it's pretty funny to me to think that the sports media thought they knew where he could possibly go, and all the whispers and everything made it seem like it was dwindling down to about 3 or 4 legit contenders, we all said. Like I said, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Tennessee, lots of places were vying for his services, no doubt. Green Bay was another one. But he ended up going to Arizona. That's his choice, and I don't hold anything against him for it. I just find it funny that the sports media in general was wrong, dead wrong, once again. Which is why sports media is a joke. Thank you for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe, hit that bell below to get notified when all the latest videos are posted on this channel at YouTube, BitChute, and Rumble. Bookmark westofsportsguy.com for that MLB preview. Spring training games have been underway for the last week. We also have the NHL is getting pretty close to their playoff season. The NBA is just about there as well. Thank you for tuning in, and I will see you next time.